Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. This video is extremely important. In order to understand why gangstalking is happening, you need to understand the differences between a liberal and a Democrat, a conservative and a Republican. Okay? A Republican is like a hyper-conservative. A Democrat is also a corporatist conservative of sorts. Bear with me. It's in the textbook definition that you see how they snared you. Now, first of all, you know that corporations control both parties, right? And therefore, they're trying to conserve the governing class's power, politically, socially, and in terms of economics. And that is the essence of what it means to be a conservative. So therefore, conservatives, by definition, control both parties. Now let's look at several dictionary definitions here to overkill that I'm right. According to various different dictionaries, Oxford Languages, Dictionary.com, Merriam-Webster, etc., a conservative is someone who is averse to change or innovation and holds traditional values. In a political context, a conservative is defined as favoring free enterprise, private ownership, and socially traditional ideas. So, they want the free market economy, they want private ownership, okay, and they want socially traditional ideas. Now let's stop right there. You're going to see that I'm right real fast here. First of all, not all change is good change. If it's good change, then it's good change. So just because there's liberals or so-called progressives that want to bring in changes doesn't mean that those changes are something that every liberal wants. A liberal is open to new ideas and favors individual rights over the governing class's agenda and the governing class's social order. That is the textbook definition of a liberal. They're opposed to big government. They're opposed to these things. Now, a Democrat historically is for big government. Why? Because, for instance, right, the federal government was needed to desegregate the South. If you want to call it that, right? It's still very segregated. They had to send federal troops. And if you left it up to the states' rights, they wouldn't have honored the government's rulings, which transcend the state courts and the state government. Okay, but it's not that simple. The bottom line is that the Democratic Party is owned by corporations. And among them, there are some good ideas. That's why the color is sort of dark blue and darkish blue. But the Republican Party is pure evil because it points directly to conservatism, which is a refusal to treat people fairly. Conservatism is racist, greedy, and evil. Think about it. They argue that because white people were here first, okay, if you want to call it that, right? They started this country, they fought for it, they were the slave masters when they touched down, what have you, so to speak, that they should magically get the lion's share of everything. That's just greedy and evil. They want to, quote unquote, keep things the way they were. Well, how was it? Right? There was slave owners and there was segregation. And after segregation, black people still own a very small percentage of the wealth. Okay, only a fraction of the percentage of the population that they make up. They're like 13%. I've seen one study that said less than 1/2 of 1% of the capital. Another one said about 4% of the wealth, what have you. Okay, they want to keep it that way. They want to keep it that way using institutions. They want to keep it that way using political parties, using social clubs, college societies. But what is that way? That way is a Greco-Roman system. That's why there's Greek fraternities in college, and historically they were used to maintain the social orders. That's why those Greek societies, frats and sororities in college were there. They were there to make sure that rich white kids, rich Jewish kids controlled things, and that people who were poor and white and poor and Jewish or people of color did not control things. They made sure that every step of the way that their groups had the upper hand. And they were encouraged, like many groups were, to teach their children to do the same in grade school. in junior high, and in every turn. That's why you see in the movies, right, those racist kids, their parents literally encourage them to do that. And of course, every racist movement has spies and plants. So they planted people on the highest levels of society because it was people who were conservatives, right? People who wanted to maintain the social orders and the white oppressive system, who had the power and the means and the motive and the ability together to create the Democratic Party and to maintain it over the years. Let's look at some other definitions now. A conservative is someone who is cautiously moderate or purposely low. A conservative estimate. They purposely keep colored people down and poor to make sure that they maintain white supremacy. Was the left doing that? Yes. Look at their policies. Their policies are designed to stigmatize the idea of being a liberal by superimposing the idea of a Democrat on a liberal. Right? They say that he should redistribute all the wealth, for example. They know that's not going to happen. They know that the banks would collapse or something. It would cause all kinds of problems. Certainly if you did it at once. They passed policies in California that caused crime to go way up, and they knew that would happen. They didn't effectively address homelessness when they could build tiny homes in small towns. This is a mostly blue state. The NIMBYs don't outnumber the masses of liberals or people who think of themselves as liberals in this state. So why did they pass the policies they did? Because they want to conserve the existing social orders. They want to conserve the government's agenda, the governing class's agenda, and the governing class's wealth. If they pay a little bit more once in a while so they can make a stupid point, okay, they don't mind doing that. They spend money on stupid stuff all the time. They don't mind paying taxes at a higher rate in California for a time so they can argue that that's not the solution. And you see a lot of people swinging right politically, and they're swinging more and more toward conservative in terms of the textbook definition. So when we look at Cambridge Dictionary, conservatives are described as not usually liking or trusting change, especially sudden change. They use the example of the phrase a conservative society or conservative outlook. According to Wikipedia, this is actually one of the better definitions that came up in terms of in excerpt form. Conservatism is a cultural, social, and political philosophy and ideology which seeks to promote and preserve traditional institutions, customs, and values. It seeks to promote and preserve traditional institutions, customs, and values. So what are the traditional values, right? White supremacy. The institutions, who are they formed by? White supremacists. What are the customs, right? Well, first of all, you got to look at the customs of Freemasonry. To this day, there's Masonic lodges that do not allow black people in their lodges. How many of the presidents were Masons? And Masons were not just Republicans. There's countless Masons who are Democrats. So they seek to conserve white supremacy like the white supremacist slave master historically and the token minorities historically helped them do it. So when we look at the word again, you have to make the distinction between a Republican and a conservative. A Republican is a particular form of being a conservative. It's a party. It's a collection of conservatives who have different ideas on how things should be. Different ideas on what it means to conserve things and how to make money and so on and so forth. The Democratic Party is also run by conservatives. Why? Again, it goes back to the textbook definition. This is how the devil deceives you. It confuses you into thinking that the church is on the right, okay, which is outrageous. Their color is even red. They even call Republicans. Publicans were tax collectors in Rome. Publicans, look it up. Meaning again. They're still tax collectors. Tax collectors are not holy people. A party of tax collectors, taxing that ass in more than one way and in more than one sense, are not holy people. People who do that are not holy people. Because the Democrat is run by corporations who rely on institutions and rely on rely on the system not redistributing their wealth to a certain degree. The Democratic Party is run by conservatives. And when you talk about progressive, what is a progressive? They're talking about progress. Progress relative to what? To the corporate agenda, right? They gentrify people. Look at San Francisco. Progressives are making it so that minorities are moving out of San Francisco and San Jose. Are they liberals? Are they open to new ideas and individual rights, including the rights of minorities? No. I've had Democrats, at least one Democrat, tell me flat out that they are not for minority rights. They don't believe in the Constitution. Now let's end this really quickly by pointing out something. If you lived in a small town, matter of fact, let's say a big town. We'll say Houston. If you lived in a big city like Houston, before a lot of minorities moved in because of the right-left paradigm, making the economy a certain way, because of the social clubs, making the social environment a certain way, because of the fraternities, making it so that people only fraternize in a certain way, a frat and a brat, mind you. Before the minorities moved in there and the crime rate went through the roof, okay, with the existing poor white people and the corporate crime as well, they would say, hey, they want to keep it a certain way. But who's ruining it that way? The people who are ruining it are conservatives. They control both parties. They control the legislation in both parties. Corporatism, conservatism, it's basically identical. So when the minorities went in there and started adopting certain cultures, while they were already canceling cultures before the term cancel culture existed, they canceled the Martin Luther King culture, they canceled the Malcolm X culture. Now some of you say, we heard this all before, but you're not understanding the nuance that proves that what you're doing right now is wrong. You don't believe in human rights, okay? Because if you really believed in them, you would scramble to give people their human rights. You don't believe in where the Constitution's right, because if you did, you wouldn't be part of a conservative movement, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, or otherwise. Conservatives are racist, they are greedy, and they are evil. Whenever you don't put righteousness first and you go with the crowd in a racist, greedy, and evil planet, nation, state, you name it, then you are racist, greedy, and evil. That's your spirit. That's the principles you live by. That's your motion. That's your intention. Those are your actions. That's who you are. Again, conservatism is a cultural, social, and political philosophy and ideology which seeks to promote and preserve traditional institutions, customs, and values. You see on the news when Democrats say that people shouldn't question the justice system, it's like, my goodness, you're the party of questioning the justice system. But then you turn around and say, hey, they're questioning our justice system. The problem wasn't that they tried to rush the Capitol, which is all a bunch of, just a political ruse, right? I mean, it happened, but it was for effect. They said the problem is that they're questioning the justice system and the election process, which everyone knows is corrupt and highly flawed. Sometimes it works in favors of the Democrats, so to speak. Sometimes it works in favors of Republicans. But really, it doesn't work in anyone's favor because the evil is bad for everybody. And injustice for one is an injustice for all. So they made it so it was harder for me to make my speech here because conservatives who don't give a damn about the Constitution, that's not what they're trying to conserve. It's just a ruse. It's a means to an end. Conservatives run both parties. Corporatism, conservatism, it's the same thing. Who are corporations? They're a grouping of governing class trash and their allies who seek to maintain their power and their control over social life, political life, and economics. They're garbage. So they got together with the Gangstalking to use technology, poisons, fumes, their massive networks, etc., in the existing institutions that conservatives seek to conserve. With the existing conditions that conservatives seek to conserve and preserve. with the existing cultural, social, and political philosophies and ideologies of oppressors that conservatives seek to conserve. They can't point to a single time in American history where low-down oppressor filth didn't govern the country. Yet they seek to conserve their power, their networks, and their processes, and the abominations that are their cities and towns. And they think that you're dumb enough to believe that minorities who were desperate and didn't know what to do and where to go because their leaders kept getting killed, they kept being coerced, raped, and abused, tortured, and killed, who then do it the conservatives' way, gang banging. They even use Old English script for their tattoos. What more do you need to know? What is a Latino, right? What is the language of the Roman Empire? Latin. They're even bred by the oppressor to be a certain way. Look up the controlling of slave breeding. They think of people as like cattle and sheep, and they breed them as such. And they use coercion, they use social control, they use social engineering, they use economic control, they use political control. They're conserving the toxic white supremacist, Jewish supremacist, and LGBT supremacist, often Greco-Roman themed, governing class, garbage beliefs, and oppressor families and their powers. Most people don't want to admit this. Oh, they don't want to admit this. If the justice system was just, especially if they are put on trial in a state where there's the death penalty, what do you think would happen to mass murderers? What do you think would happen to people who make sure that it's a rape system? What do you think would happen to people who drug the masses? What do you think would happen to people who encourage and insist that children get molested in the church? What do you think would happen? They'd be given 5 hours of, community service? No. I'll leave it there as a rhetorical question, we'll say. Thank you.